I will show you some footage with my thoughts and impressions now for each of the 3 games. I will start with the most recent one, Sword and Fairy 7, Together Forever. I will try and point out as best I can the distinctive attributes that I think make these games somewhat different from current RPGs here in the West, including, of course, Japanese RPGs, which we've had for a very long time in the West. Chinese RPGs, not so much. So this was quite a journey of discovery for me. Thank you for coming along, and I hope you enjoy the ride. Please note that there will inevitably be some very mild story spoilers, but I really try to keep that low and only really for the opening story setting. This is the very opening of the game, the prologue. You find yourself, or rather your protagonist Xu Wu, in a sort of dungeon called Yanbo. You've really got no clue what's going on. It's a bit mysterious. You only know you've got to fight your way through. Fortunately, he is a deity, so he's got some special tricks up his sleeve. It's a quite dramatic prologue. It'll only take you 20 minutes to clear, but there's some really stunning cutscenes in there, plus you get a sort of intro tutorial. It takes a while to get rid of this practice bird. I'm honestly not totally sure about when exactly the combo hit does the job. Because his sword is quite long and heavy, it feels like that when you play, but it means you can't be quite as fast as maybe the game thinks you should be. QTEs seem to be still in vogue with Chinese RPGs. They will pop up suddenly, even during or near the end of combat throughout the game. A lot of the movement in the game has a sort of almost balletic feel. Comparisons with the Chinese fantasy and martial arts movies spring to mind. As so often, attacking when the enemy is just about to attack you seems to give the best results.
若是被他追上，只怕又是一场恶战。此地不宜久留。
神聪，你是如何潜入魔界的？从实招来！
凭你，来吧！
It takes quite a while to whittle him down, but eventually he must fall. As you can see throughout the game, there is a strong emphasis on luxurious cutscenes, sometimes almost operatic set pieces. It's all very impressive, but you need to be aware, if you want to play this game, that there will be constant interruptions in the flow of gameplay by cutscenes and sometimes scenes that require QTEs. This somehow reminds me a bit of PS3 era games that also favoured these techniques. You see what I mean about him looking gorgeous. Sometimes a little bit of platforming is required. And there it happened. He fell. To where? Well, I'm not giving anything away, but you can probably guess where he ends up. And so the story begins. We find ourselves in a peaceful, old-fashioned Chinese village. I love this kind of setting, but there are a lot of very narrow, winding paths and streets, and without the map, I'd be totally lost. The birds fly up, and we get a beautiful, swooping aerial view over the village and the surrounding area. There is some kind of portal opening up in the sky, and what's happening down here? The squirrel is scampering off. Who is that on the big bird? Oh my goodness, full on action. The girl on the bird is our heroine, our protagonist, Yue Qing-shu. She's made it safely. Whew. Rampant vicious beasts increasing in numbers. We know we've got a job lined up with our friendly spirit bird Xiaoling, who is also our fast travel agent. You can already see from the first cutscenes here that the game is absolutely dripping with charm and beauty and fantasy elements, like who wouldn't want to ride on a big bird? Next best thing to riding on a dragon, in my opinion. This is the game interface. I like it because it's not cluttered. This is really all you need. The D-pad has map, quest, backpack, and your combat commands pop up once you're in battle. The map is great, and it's so easy to access. I use it all the time. So now we're going into the village for the first time, and this is really where our story begins properly. Our first job is to visit Uncle Pang. Your main story and current quests are always ready to hand and informative. Uncle has skived off, so I will now give you a quick overview of the features in the game. Unfortunately, I don't have as much footage as I thought I did, but it should be enough to introduce you. Here the trader will ask us for assistance, and this is our very first side quest, and I'll show you that one very briefly. There are heaps of side quests in this game. If you love them, you will have a ball. If you don't, I don't think you have to do most of them. It's just a way of getting some extra items, a few bonuses, and some more combat experience. But a lot of the quests are of the fetch and inquiry type as well. The easiest way to track your side quests is via the map and the exclamation marks, much quicker than using the menu. There are some rogue elements here in the crops to get rid of. Her flying arrow special skill is useful for wide area attacks, and she's finally defeated the magic ginseng. I hope you noticed how Xiaoling was darting in with attacks as well. Now it's time to confront the sugar thief. Ginseng comes up with all kinds of excuses and emotional blackmail, but we are steadfast and the quest is solved. The user interface is really well thought out and designed. We return the sugar, and the conversation goes on for quite a while. People do love talking in these games.
新鲜好吃的糖饼哎！
I find the control scheme very good to use. It certainly suits me. The 4 face buttons are assigned exactly as I like it. I'm always grateful for the camera reset option. Pressing down for sprint actually does work, and accessing the abilities via R2 and then choosing feels completely intuitive to me, and actually reminds me just a little bit of Ys 8, and of course you know I love that system. Switching characters with L2 is super easy and quick, and accessing the map via the D-pad is also brilliant. Here are now some of the basic moves you need for fighting your way through the game. Move and jump will be obvious, so will be the normal attack and stringing together combos of that. You can also jump with it, the lock-on, and then something they call joint strike, which to me is really a series of combos reminiscent of fighting games. So we have an interesting mix here of mechanics we know from RPGs, mainly via abilities, and fighting game mechanics. Here is a nice illustration of the difference between general abilities and special abilities, which are what I call the fighting game style mechanics. You start out with 2 abilities in each category. It's great having a healing skill like Chi Therapy so early in the game. Here is the menu for general abilities with all 4 spots set. This character clearly covers all the 4 elements. I haven't seen a lot of change in the equipment for the various characters. Maybe I just haven't found new pieces. I'm a bit puzzled by that. That seems to be unlike most other RPGs. And here are your abilities. And it's really nice how there is a demonstration there in a little video clip to show each move. I wish more games would do that. Finally, we have the all-important dodge, and it's pretty straightforward in this game. And accelerate jump is actually important in this game because there is some platforming. So that's a very quick overview. There is more, especially as you get further into the game, but those are the basics. At the blacksmith's, the absentee Uncle Peng, you can do a very simple upgrading of your weapons. It reminds me a bit of the basic strengthening you get in Ys 8. You can cook dishes to enhance your stats. I've got several recipes by now, but that's your first one and one of the best. I have had an issue with accessing the cooking facility at a few of the cooking stations. I'm not entirely sure whether this is a small bug or glitch, but it's been a minor inconvenience.
这个是什么？我从来没吃过。
这叫三蒸鲜宝，好吃吗？
好好吃。
You can also order food at a shop, an easy and quick option, and the food always looks delicious.
菜来喽！
And now the mini games. I've only unlocked 2 so far with the Leaf Fairy. One of them is the leaf jumping, which is really tricky. You need to jump from one leaf to the next higher one, and so on until you reach the top and the goal. Here is the Leaf Fairy getting all excited about me playing Journey Heaven and Earth, the astonishing bamboozling card game. Each round is very quick, and please do not ask me to explain the rules because I can't. But it's heaps of fun, and it is actually a bit addictive. And yes, we can pet Jiaoling. Minigames are of course nothing new in RPGs. They go back to the early classic games. I remember my surprise in Suikoden 1 when I suddenly was required to play, I think it was a game of dice. The translation of shorter dialogue scenes, for me, seems perfectly fine. I find it reads well and quite naturally on the whole. More difficult text type, however, can be a different matter. We'll look at that as well. I had mentioned the deep lore before, and you can see just a little bit here. Under whatever category you look, whether it's creatures or divine weapons or spirits or sceneries, everything is absolutely packed with background information. What you will notice in these text-heavy menu entries is the translation. It's not as good as the one for the dialogue. The meaning is still clear, so that's important, but the grammar is awkward and it just reads a bit clumsy. Improvement there would be welcome, but it certainly didn't deter me from diving into all that information. This game operates on a truly grand scale, which probably explains the many cutscenes. I wanted to show you a proper combat scene with using all the abilities, but it's actually tricky. They only flash up very briefly in the bottom right-hand side there. I hope you can see it. What's more, from a quite early chapter on, there's a story development which I don't really want to reveal here, but any of the team combat scenes would do that. So this is pretty much all I can show you at the moment. That was a terrific beast. While I'm in a graphics-heavy scene, I just want to comment on the performance. I haven't had any specific issues running it on the PS4, but occasionally you do notice that the frame rate struggles just a tiny bit. Not surprisingly, it was better on the Xbox Series S. There are also sometimes issues like pop-in and clipping through textures. It didn't bother me much. However, playing on either a PS5 or an Xbox Series would undoubtedly be the best option. One of the delights are the many strange critters and monsters you meet.
不能让妖怪侵入村子。平日温和的山野精怪，为何如此暴力？
Wherever you see these shimmering golden spots, there is an item there. It's all loot. Be sure to grab it. By chapter 9 you can see I've done a fair number of side quests, and there are plenty more to come if you consider that the game has 33 chapters. Characters have a special skill depending on the terrain you're in. We know that feature from many other RPGs. Now we go snowboarding. There is just so much in this game, I don't know where to begin or where to stop. Xiaoling has been joined by another spirit, as you see, the ice spirit Hajan. He joins you after a mission with a boss fight. The visuals and animations in the menu are absolutely wonderful. You can feed your spirits different types of spirit fruit. They are not easy to come by, so do keep an eye out for them. Fast travel works directly from the map. You simply pick the location you need to go to, in this case Lulong town, and off you go. I won't show you the complete loading screen on my old PS4 because it is a bit excruciating. And here they are, Lulong, the mining town. It is time to say goodbye to Yu Jingshu, the graceful young woman who is not fazed by dealing with either deities or monsters. There is a vast pantheon of gods and devils here, a large cast of characters, a beautiful and sometimes terrible world to explore, many adventures. It's almost like a cross between Chinese opera and martial arts fantasy movies. You will certainly experience Chinese mythology in all its grandeur and beauty. What are the noticeable features of the Sword and Fairy series? Well, this is a list I have come up with. Maybe you've got some other points to add to it. We'll see whether the other two games follow in a similar style. I hope you find it helpful to keep these features in mind when you decide whether the style of this game is for you. It obviously won't suit everybody. Let's have a very quick look at the slightly older game, Sword and Fairy 6. I have only played 2 hours so far, so just a few quick impressions. I can show you a little bit of the opening, and that in itself will already demonstrate the big difference between this and the newer game, number 7. You can see straight away that the graphics look very different, much simpler. With this scene, the story and the gameplay starts. I was just trying to figure out what was going on and who these people are when... Oh boy, what a tutorial. It's poorly presented and I struggled to make sense of it, to be honest. It took me a full hour of futzing around with combat to figure out how the basic system works, and even then there are a few elements I still haven't quite got. You can see the animation is not terribly good. Characters often look like they float or are being pushed around the scene. Playing on the PS4 Pro, the graphics are a bit janky, somewhat reminiscent of the early PS3 era, I would say. The game is by now, of course, about 9 years old. but I was still surprised how sluggish and unresponsive the user interface often was. The game has many cutscenes, some are quite extended. I mention that just in case it's a sticking point for you. Map. There is a map, and it is excellent. Skits. There are very short skits, remind me just a little bit of the Tales games. And there is a hint at a secret in their background. Nice. And here is what is probably my biggest gripe with the game, and that is the trotting speed. It is on the slow side. He is actually what I would call probably the fastest runner, but it's like moving through molasses, and the maps are fairly large, so getting from one end to the other is a bit excruciating. I looked everywhere for a sprint button. I cannot find one. If there is one, please do let me know. Each character has a special area skill. The young girl Yuchi has a mind over matter skill, which will help you control objects, especially when you need to somehow platform to reach other areas. Most of the NPCs don't have much of interest to say, but occasionally you can pick up a side quest. You can increase your reputation through various activities and responses, but I'm not quite sure yet what exactly the benefit is in the game. Jumping and platforming are quite important in this game, just as in Sword and Fairy 7. The shop interface is not too bad, thankfully. Here I'm trying to purchase my first new weapon, and then obviously equip it. This is the system menu. You can only use step-by-step D-pad controls to get around. In the options, there's a setting for battle mode. You can either have it in real time or what they call round, which I interpreted as turn-based, and I chose that while I was acclimating myself. You can use auto battle anytime during combat, and I found it sometimes speeds up things a bit because some skills seem to have quite a long cooldown period. Here we have received a new title, so let's have a quick look at the titles. You will probably be reminded of the Tales games titles, and I think it's quite similar. They are easy to equip, but the big challenge here is scrolling through the lot of them. There are a heap of titles. So if you love chasing those titles and their bonus combat benefits, you got a feast here. And remember, just like there's no fast running, there is no fast scrolling. You need to click through each title one by one. This is the first dungeon, early stages of me figuring out how to operate the combat. There is a main player character or leader in that group, and that's the one you'll control by default. It doesn't mean you can't control the other ones. You can, but I found that a bit trickier to work out. They will act via AI on their own as well. The combat skill controls are in the bottom right corner. You highlight the enemy you want to attack, pick the person, by default the party leader. The other two have a mixture of fighting and support skills. At this stage, I'm able to string together 2 or 3 attack skills, but I did notice that if I use the maximum number too often, there's definitely a cooldown period. This type of combat interface is clearly designed for PC, where you can quickly click through a variety of options. you need to consider your stance or battle strategy on the left side. Then click your way through several steps of options for attacker, skill, enemy focus, and that's before you might even have to use healing items. So not ideal for a console interface, but it works, and once you get used to it, it is workable. There is a mystery guest who will offer extra bonuses for specific mission goals. They're usually about finishing a fight within a very short time frame. I've so far not been able to meet those, so obviously I need to practice a bit more. Here is a healing spot, which tells us there is likely to be a boss ahead. We had a sort of practice fight with some scorpions just before this, which was helpful. But now we're gonna face the real thing.
怎么是这东西？明明叫他去请。哼，罢了，有这魔藏者在，本座也不惧怕他们。魔藏者，杀了他们！
正面交给我，你们伺机攻击。
扰乱敌人的阵脚。
Oops, a difficult scorpion. Better try again. Now, one thing I wish, the speech text is large enough, I find, but I wish it was like in bold lettering. Some of the messages I didn't really see quickly enough the first time round. Okay, time to sort out this sucker. He's got some nasty small scorpions supporting him, and it's vital to take those out. And Devil Scorpion goes down. Now, I made the mistake at the beginning of opting for easy mode, thinking I could change it later, but you can't, so I recommend to stick with normal mode. I wish I had. So that's Sword and Fairy 6. I know it has a lot of flaws, but there's also quite a lot that's enjoyable in there. And if you like an RPG with a deep story and a fair amount of cutscenes to explore all that, then this is something just a bit different from your regular either Western or Japanese RPG. Finally, let's have a look at the sister series to Sword and Fairy, Xuan Yuan Sword 7. The opening scenes are set during Li Xiao's childhood, and I'm showing you this because the toy he's going to retrieve from the tree is a clockwork kite, and it plays an important part in the story later on, which of course I shall not reveal. While he clambers up the tree, let's have a look at the first impression of the graphics, and they look very nice. Maybe not quite as polished as Sword and Fairy 7, but nonetheless I was straight away quite enamoured with the look of the game. It does have a tendency towards the brownish colour palette though, and you'll see that a bit later. Certain environments can look a bit dull. So Li Xiao has managed to get the kite off the tree, and he now returns home to look after his little sister, Li Xiang. And what captured me straight away was the relationship between them and how naturally the two children are portrayed. Here we see Li Xiao showing his little sister the toy that Hong made for her.
気に入ったのか? 俺もすごく好きなんだ.
But then something happens. He bundles up little Li Xiang and they have to escape from the house. Chinese developers seem to love QTE style sequences, and that's what you need to do here to escape. He's made it out of the city, and we see an early indication of Li Xiang's persistent illness. Don't worry, I'll protect you, good girl, he says. We fast forward and Li Xiao is now an adult living with his sister in the woods in a modest hut. This is where the events start, with a captain from the army approaching him with a request for doing some scouting work for him. And that is a suitable introduction to the basics of exploration and fighting. He says goodbye to his sister in that last look. I think that tells you everything about his love for his sister. I now want to have a look at some of the features of this game, which is in all respects really what I would call a traditional RPG. The traditional campfire save point, we all recognise it. Like in the other games, there's a fair amount of terrain traversal here, with some platforming. Here, Zhao gets his first stance, the ox stance, the basic one. There is an explanation. The tutorial and help material in this game is excellent. It's far removed from what we encountered in Sword and Fairy 6. You will have noticed that red distance marker by now, a feature I tend to associate with Western games for some reason. Here we see a bit more typical platforming. Personally, I'm not too fussed actually about that distance marker. I like to rely more on a good map, and the map in this game is absolutely excellent. Also, the red marker makes me go just in one direction, and this game actually encourages a bit of exploration elsewhere, and you can find some really rare and valuable equipment and other stuff just by foraging around. By the way, this early basic wolf fight shows you how fast the combat is. So if you love fluid action RPGs, this might be worth a look if you're also into the whole Chinese ambience. Do you need all these item drops? You do. Lots of crafting to come. One of the first missions Li Xiao faces is getting rid of some wolves in the village, in particular in the granary. And because that fire wolf is such a nice opponent, I just want to give you a quick glimpse of that fight. At this stage I'm only using the basic attacks, heavy and light, dodging if I remember, and maybe a martial art with R2. I just learned Oxstan's second move. And to finish him off, we get a nice flashy cutscene. The villagers and soldiers manage to finish off the rest of the wolves, and everyone is very grateful. And I get the wolf stance. The game moves you forward very nicely, that you can constantly learn skills, upgrade. That is just how I like it. Yes, this game has puzzles. No, they're not difficult. I just want to mention that this quite traditional disc locking mechanism puzzle is also part of the very strong supernatural element of this game's story, and you know how I love the supernatural aspect. I would call it quite an eccentric part of the story, and I really love it. There has to be a mini-game, of course, and here it is Zulu chess. If you scan the text, you can see that the translation is not brilliant. The grammar is slightly wonky, but I had no problems understanding everything, so I'm okay with that. There is an absolute mountain of text in this game. It's a heavy job to get all that translated. However, if it's machine translated, I'm not a fan of that at all. For me, as long as the dialogue reads well and quite natural, I'm happy. You get a first practice run at Zulu chess, complete with very quirkily translated instructions. And at the end, he very generously hands you victory. I have yet to return for some more practice sessions. It may look simple, but there is some strategy and depth to this game. I've never been too much into mini-games. I love the traditional RPG side of things with the fighting and the exploration, the skills and the crafting. I can never get too much loot to upgrade my equipment. That's what it's all about for me. So let's have a look at that side of things. Always the pillar of any good RPG. First, let's fast travel using a guard stone. We know this feature from most RPGs and action-adventure games too these days. It's great. I have no complaints. The journal is wonderful, just like in Sword and Fairy 7. It's beautifully presented with heaps of information. Honestly, I actually like delving into it in between. It just really helps getting immersed a lot more, and you understand everything better. The control layout is pretty good, I think. It follows convention mostly. Heavy and light attack are where I would expect them to be. The only ones I changed, I think I reversed dodge and interact, X and circle. In Asia it tends to be this way round, but for me, more used to Western layouts, I prefer having the X assigned to the interact confirm button and dodge for circle. Note the companion skills assigned via the L1 shoulder button, but also something called Elysium Rift and Imprison, and those two I want to show you now. Early on, at the beginning of the game, you are given access to Elysium. It's more or less, quite prosaically, a place where you can upgrade a variety of features, like there's an accessory workshop, a harness workshop, a weapon one, fusion lab, that's a very interesting one, and armor workshop. Pretty much what you'd expect in an RPG. Quite obviously, upgrading these workshops will enable you to produce, craft and upgrade a wider variety of items. Let's take a quick look at Zhao's profile and equipment. I haven't got any new gear at this early stage, but there's a different piece of attire. What I really wanted to show you is the menu. It's clean, it's so easy to navigate, everything is well illustrated and presented. We RPG folks spend half of our time in the menu, so it's really important that they are well constructed. Here is a story element I want to draw your attention to. There's mention of someone called Mohists, or also the Mohist sect in this game, and I thought at first it was fictional until I had the sense to look it up. Goodness me, there is a fascinating history behind this. Mohism was an ancient Chinese philosophy developed around 400 BC. At one time it was seen as a major rival to Confucianism. I love it when I learn new things that broaden my horizons. Imprison is a special skill that does exactly what it says, as illustrated here. Execution used together with imprison fills your Elysium energy, which you can then use in a very powerful move called Elysium Rift that slows down time. Here is how the imprisoning works in practice. You just need to whittle down the spirit's HP and then execute. You can then, in your Elysium workshop, use the captured soul for fusion. The fusion lab is the most fun of the crafting stations. So let's play around with this. Put in the soul of Grimling, freshly harvested, and then we have to do a bit of guesswork what else might work with it. I tried several things and they were just grey, so I tried nephrite and, well, it was green, so I thought there might be something there. Press the button and yippee! We've got our first soul of malevolence. To equip it, you go to talent, which is basically your skills, and next to your martial arts, you will find the harnessed souls. And that's where you can equip your specially custom crafted spirit souls. I became quite addicted to this and crafted as many souls as I could. So it's reminiscent of other RPGs where maybe you embed crystals or gems or special spirit power into your equipment or skill gauge. But I thought the system was something different. I hope this has given you a bit more of an insight into this engrossing game. What holds it all together is the very strong, affectionate relationship between brother and sister, and any player who bonds with them will surely have a good time. Thank you very much, as always, for watching. Please keep well. I'm Food for Dogs. Bye bye.
お話をして、私は薬を飲む。これではいくよ。